Hello there and welcome to this vlog of August 2023. Slight change of plans this week because I really wanted to do campaign operations today. But unfortunately I got this splitting horrible migraine thing for like 3 days when I came back from holiday. So I've not been able to do any of the prep for that video. So I thought I'd do something that needed a lot less prep today. This is really just like an opinion piece. I promise you though, because I know some people have kind of been speaking to me about this on social media platforms because I've been talking about it quite a bit. I will do the campaign operations. It will probably take months anyway, so I'll just kind of segment it into parts. It's going to be kind of a long burn thing that I'll probably do between like now and Christmas because there's a hell of a lot to talk about because the campaign ops book is massive. So that will be a thing. I'm just going to keep doing random videos between it, like this one or like lore videos or whatever. Anyway, let's get on to today's topic. And I suppose I need to frame this one slightly carefully because it's not a controversial topic really. The issue with it though is that a lot of people get very passionate and very salty about what I'm going to talk about, and I think it's slightly ridiculous that people do get salty about it for reasons I will obviously go on to explain. But the topic is how your faction or your force or whatever else in BattleTech never really dies. Now, I need to put some caveats on this, as I always do. As you'll know if you've watched me before, I love a caveat before I get into the topic, just to protect me really against the kind of the heat that I know may be generated from my opinion on this topic. So obviously things in BattleTech can die if you're talking about really elongated periods of time. For instance, the Star League no longer exists when you play the game. Right. Again, does it though? Are the clans the Star League? Okay, controversial point. But let's just say that, okay, things do die. The Terran hemorrhaginidae. I can never say that word, so I'm not even going to try. The kind of, the sixth inner sphere power, if you want to put it that way. Hegemony. I think that might be it. I've heard like 20 different pronunciations of that word, but basically the one of the central powers around the soul solar system in very early days of BattleTech history and lore, they no longer exist. That was a power that basically, or a state that collapsed after the Star League left, and it's something that people not so much lament it, but the Star League going basically ended that particular power, because the other inner sphere powers, the five that we all know and love or despise, then vultures over a carcass just went in and picked the bones dry and basically destroyed that that particular power. So yeah, okay, they don't exist anymore, but again, that's really kind of in the historical annals of BattleTech. What I'm talking about specifically, and this is the big caveat, it's kind of between the areas which we, well, not all of us, but most of us play within. So that's kind of the, 3015 era up to the 3151 Ilkhan era. So you've got basically that 140 years, whatever it is, where the story takes place. There are obviously other stories. I know that. I mean, obviously you've got your history, but then you've got things like the proliferation series, which deals with how the mechs were came around. That's been quite a popular little anthology, I think. So, and that's very much before the time that we kind of operate in as BattleTech players or BattleTech fans, whatever you want to call us. So, I am specifically talking about the common era, if you want to put it that way. Why this topic came up for me is because, or why I want to discuss it, is because I hear a lot of people complaining about how, in a way, dynamic the BattleTech writers are. So, 1 minute there will be a major power, in that, in that sandbox that we're talking about, between, again, just say between 3115, sorry, 3015 and 3151, that sandbox area, you'll suddenly find that a power is just like poof, it's gone out of existence. This happens quite often with the clans. So you will see in there, I mean, a clan that I particularly like is, well, I say like in the loosest term, because if you've watched me, you'll know that I'm not a fan of the clans. But Clan Goliath Scorpion, I think, are relatively interesting because they're kind of like artifact hunters. They're a home clan as well, so they don't get like massively embroiled in inner-sphere politics. So, and I quite like that about certain clans, like when they're doing their own thing out on the periphery and they're not genociding or invading or all the other horrible things they do. So I've kind of, I do have a soft spot for them a little bit. I also love the little like conspiracy theory that I once came across that Cranston Snord was from Clan Goliath Scorpion and basically attached himself to the Wolf's Dragoons. And that's why the Snords Irregulars are like obsessed with like going and finding artifacts in the inner sphere, because it comes from like Cranston's background. I mean, we don't really know him before that like infamous card game where he basically wins his like mercenary regiment. So before that, he's like, he's quite not old, but he's like middle-aged at that time. So who knows what he was doing like out on the periphery and where he really comes from. Again, I think it's a conspiracy theory that I'm talking about. It's not like canon or anything like that. But he's one of my his mercenary outfit and his daughter as well, who I absolutely adore. Like, love Rhonda Snord. That group, kind of, if you want to look at it, they do come from that like, the nicer part of clan culture. So not like the invasion clan. They're not like Clan Smoke Jaguar or anything like that. It's another force that got wiped out for a time as well, but I digress. So yeah, like, for me, I could look at that and get quite prickly. I'm like, well, I had one clan that I quite liked, and then it ends in, and it's quite an early, like, end to them as well. They do, though, end up, and again, remember my lore is out after, like, 3067 is like a black hole. I don't really know much at all, because I don't really care about it. But there's like some kind of empire that forms out of Clan Goliath Scorpion and one of like the periphery powers. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'm sure someone will put it in the comments. But they've kind of come back to some extent. So yeah, okay, great. There's some kind of something there anyway, and that kind of segues me nicely into what I really want to discuss. In that, because of the way that they write it, and that's a good example actually, Clan Goliath Scorpion and basically being reformed at a certain junction in time is one good example of how that operates. But the levels of heat that people give to this, like, and I think the best example, and if you're into BattleTech at all, you'll know what I'm going to talk about now, and that's basically Rasselhag. Rasselhag was like super popular. They were like the underdogs between the Draconis Combine, the Lyran Commonwealth. Basically then, they were like a free independent state for like something like under 20 years, and then the clans invaded, and that was like the first part of the inner sphere that they came up against and basically just wiped them off the map, which people got very upset about. But that brings me now into kind of the central ethos or topic or theory, or whatever you want to call it, which I'm going to discuss now. People just look at it the entire wrong way, like with a very like skewered understanding of what a force or an area or a power is, not just in BattleTech but in like a wider geopolitical like sense. So Rasselhag is an area of space that goes back like a long time in the BattleTech history. It was basically like, and this is the same for most areas or regions or systems within BattleTech, where you've got like a small pocket or a cluster of like systems or maybe even planets in one system, where they become like a quasi-independent autonomous state. And what happened then over like several hundred years the inner sphere powers ended up annexing these, whether peacefully or through accords or militarily through invasion. Rasselhag was one of those. It was an area of space that eventually got annexed into the Draconis Combine. They were never truly happy though, because they always kind of affiliated themselves with like Nordic Scandinavian power. So like, and that's not to say, I always reiterate this point because it's important. That doesn't mean that they're all like Swedish and Norwegian and Danish people on these planets. They were as diverse as like our own planet or any of the planets in like the BattleTech universe. It's just that their ruling power felt an affinity to like the old Scandinavian countries, or well, modern Scandinavian countries for us. And like they had that kind of heritage, and that they have then their common language. So they speak like a form of Swedish and Japanese mix, and that makes sense because they've got that Swedish tradition. There's probably English thrown in there as well, because English is kind of the common language in BattleTech for obvious like commercial reasons for our real world, because you don't want to say everyone speaks French, because otherwise we won't be able to read the books, right? So that makes sense. But there are pockets where they'll have like different languages, and this is one of those. But that's not to say they don't speak English. They do. It's just they've got their own kind of dialects and languages that kind of that manifest over time, which is exactly how it's operated through real human history. But Rasselhag, so it goes back a long way. So that's the first thing to say. They then, in an act of not uniqueness, because this happens for several powers across the inner sphere in this time. Famous, the big two, I suppose it's three really, but the big two famous ones are the St. Ives Compact, obviously Rasselhag as well, but also Andurian. That's always been a real like splinter to the Free Worlds League. All powers though really have their own version of this. It's like the Lyrans have Sky. Like Sky is always quite a rebellious area within like the Lyran Commonwealth. But for want of a better term here, the three that succeeded, Andurian's a bit sketchy, but also I'll just talk about the two main ones here. So that's Rasselhag and St. Ives. They both got their independence within a few years of each other, like in the, I think, just from memory, I think St. Ives is 3029 and Rasselhag is like 3033, something like that. Why did it happen then? Well, okay, and I won't go too far into the geopolitics here, but my theory is on it that the inner sphere at that point, this is at the end of the succession wars, although, the War of 3039 was just around the corner, but shelve that for a second. But, there was kind of a renaissance happening. The Helm Memories Core had been recovered, society was starting to heal itself, and people were just sick of war. So after this 100 years of fighting, it was basically just like, okay, they want their independence. Okay, we don't like it, but we accept it. And I think that's generally how the Draconis Combine and the Capellans were for those respective powers. Draconis obviously for Rasselhag, the Capellans for St. Ives. There was a lot of geopolitics going on as well, so it wasn't just like that they didn't want to fight for it. Obviously, Rasselhag's quite famous because it was actually Comstar that wanted that border. They wanted a border between like the Lyrans and the Draconis Combines for a multitude of reasons that I've spoken about on the channel before, so I won't go through all those again. But effectively, what I'm trying to get at here is that the independence of Rasselhag and St. Ives is a mere blink of an eye in the context of like the BattleTech history. St. Ives got independence for slightly longer, so they eventually got repatriated, I think that's the nice term for it, back into the Capellan Confederation in the 3060s. Rasselhag, I mean, who knows what would have happened if the clans hadn't have invaded, but would they have a similar point where like a powerful Draconis Combine then just takes them back over? Saying that as well, the Lyrans aren't innocent in this. The Lyrans and Rasselhag were never friends either. The Lyrans certainly, absolutely took over pockets of traditional Rasselhag, during the succession wars, and then, but because they were they were Draconis Combine power back then. No one really cared about that. But because people who then became Rasselhag players and fans of Rasselhag, because they're very central to the plot, and they're a cool like indie power that, you know, kind of get badly treated, and they're a bit like rebellious, so I can understand the appeal. But I've gone a long way to say this. My theory, though, is it's not a theory; it's a fact. They never ended, right? The Rasselhag, the area of Rasselhag, whether it is the Rasselhag Republic or whether it's like the Rasselhag within the Draconis Combine, it's still there. It still predominantly has the same military. It's just those militaries align themselves to different powers. So, you know, yes, you get that I suppose the glorious golden age, whatever you want to call it, of Rasselhag, where they've got their independence and they've got their own government. Then the clans invade, it all goes wrong. Comstar have to basically occupy it post Tuckeid to kind of keep the peace. But then you've got this like really, I mean, they've by far have the most interesting like journey then of all the Inner Sphere powers post clan invasion, because initially they are occupied by Clan Wolf. They then get taken over by Clan Ghostbear. Clan Ghostbear, who are famously like one of the nicer clans, or as I like to call them, Clan Ghost Bearable, because they're less genocidal than the rest of them, but they're still pretty bad. Because they had a much... They are not Clan Smoke Jaguar, where they are putting like bondsmen into servitude and basically nuking planets and things like that. They're very different. So they basically formed a new state with well, the Ghost. They call it the Ghost Bear. Is it the Ghost Bear Dominion? And then it becomes the Rasselhag Dominion. This is like into the Dark Age and then into the Ilkhan era. I think that's right. Anyway, just off the top of my head. But those two areas, like you know, those two powers that combine a new power, still have all the same like, say, traditions that they then will merge. So I'm sure that like the military of like the Rasselhag Dominion looks very different from back in the day, and they are still technically like an occupied force. But let's get down to the crux of it now, and that's like how this affects you as a BattleTech fan and your power. So the power that you love has gone from occupied by Draconis Combine to independent, to occupied by Clan Wolf, to occupied by Clan Ghostbear, to a union with Clan Ghostbear. It's not static. That makes it interesting. And within the confines of that, you can still play on tabletop as Rasselhag, you know, a force within Rasselhag that is affiliated to the Draconis Combine, obviously because back in, say, you know, 3015, it was part of the Draconis Combine. So you can then play the famous like regiments and battalions coming out of Rasselhag. It's just they are under the Draconis banner. If you really wanted to kind of get creative with it as well, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to run like an insurrection for Rasselhag independence that occurred in 3008. No one's going to stop you doing that. And this like regiment go rogue and basically try to kick out the Draconis Combine on a planet that's traditionally affiliated with Rasselhag. So you can like create your entire dynamic and game and campaign, whatever you want to do. If you want to kind of keep strictly within, I say strictly, be more loosely within the law. Strictly though, that you don't just, I'm going to assume you're not just going to be like, yeah, well, Rasselhag basically won the entire Inner Sphere in 3008, because then that really is no longer BattleTech, that's your own thing. But like if you're looking at it within the confines of what the sandbox, I always like to refer it as that the game like gatekeepers have created for us over the years, then I quite, you know, you can do what you want, right? Like you can, then they get independent, so you can go back and run a campaign where they are doing defensive operations against the clans or counter-attacking, or, you know, maybe there is a regiment that kind of survived this and went on a revenge mission against the clans in the Draconis Combine, the Lyran Commonwealth, for 8 years, you know, during the 3060s or whatever, right? Like you can get so creative with it. Likewise, you come into the clan invasion era then, the Ilkhan era, and you then can start doing interesting things. Like maybe there is a new independence movement like building in the Rasselhag Dominion, which I believe that is because, and I only know this from like hearsay because I've not read the books, but I think what happens in the Ilkhan is that the Rasselhag Dominion like side with Clan Wolf and like go into that like Wolf Empire. Obviously, parts of that of the Rasselhag Dominion aren't happy with that. So you know there could be tension there that you can kind of exploit and do like story arcs on. And again, just to reiterate, it never stops, right? Like it never nobody just cuts Rasselhag out of the galaxy and just says, okay, you can't play on those worlds anymore. Like they're all being blown up. Bye. That's not how it works, right? For myself, I've been again, I say victim with the smallest possible V, because I don't feel like a victim here. But when I first got into BattleTech, and I've always really been like a Fed Sons like fanboy, really. But my second power was always St. Ives. In fact, the few mechs that I had when I was a kid, I literally had like, I think like 8, because it was very difficult to get them over in Britain. I had like half of them were painted as Federated Sons, and half of them were actually painted as the St. Ives Armoured Cavalry, who I quite liked. Or it was some iteration of St. Ives Armoured Cavalry. I think I'd seen them in one of the books and gave them like that kind of paint scheme. I think it was them. Anyway, that was quite a long time ago now, but that's what I had in my head. The St. Ives armor cover, actually, this is where you kind of go, you can kind of see my theory here right on the granular. They are a very like famous, prestigious Capellan force. So they're Capellan for way longer than they're like affiliated to St. Ives Independence. But what happens is when St. Ives gets its independence, they make an agreement with Candice Liao, who's basically the lady who splits off the St. Ives Compact, that they will stay, they will fight for St. Ives, but they just won't be deployed outside of St. Ives, so kind of as a defensive operational thing. She agrees to that. When then the St. Ives Compact gets repatriated back into Capellan space, they then become incorporated back into the Capellan army. Or the wider army, and they then continue on with their illustrious Capellan adventure and fight for the Capellans. So they never go away. They're, as far as I am aware, I mean, even their camo doesn't change. You know, they're not. I'm sure, like maybe leaders change. Obviously, they do change because obviously people retire and die. But what I'm saying is, I don't think it was like, and I don't know the story inside out, but there wasn't like a coup in the wider regiment or something, and all of a sudden the lieutenant colonel or the general's been killed and then replaced by someone who's now, you know, friendly to Candice Liao. It will have just been probably the same guy in the office or girl who's like, oh, okay, change of banner, we're here. As long as you keep us on defensive ops and we don't have to go and fight like our old comrades in the Capellan Confederation, we're fine, but we'll do it defensively. So again, right from top geopolitical right down to kind of the granular, where I'm talking there about specific regiments within groups, you can continue to play your forces. You do get situations where, like, and this was a big problem with the Jihad, where they basically just like binned everything. They were like, oh, everybody's just being murdered now by word of Blake. So that was, a terrible commercial decision as well. They've rectified that quite a bit, though, by bringing things back like the Grey Death Legion. Obviously, Clan Smoke Jaguar were destroyed as well, but that had nothing to do with the Jihad. That was because of Operation Bulldog. But they've they've now reintroduced Clan Smoke Jaguar a little bit as well. They'll never be Smoke Jaguar, though, really, will they? Because, they got curb stomped. But wider point on this, though, like, you can still get creative with it. So, like, you could say, for instance, my particular mercenary group was destroyed in whenever, usually it's 3067, that's when they kind of did the big, like, reset button during the Jihad. But, if you want to play into the Dark Age, so like in 3120 or whatever, there is some random, like, mercenary force finds, like, the cache of, I don't know, it's like the Waco Rangers or something, who were destroyed during that kind of, that era, I think, in the 3060s. and they find all the the insignia, and they basically then revamp the Waco Rangers. So you've got like Waco's Battle Master, so you can still play them on tabletop. Obviously, as human life as it is, Wayne Waco would, if he hadn't have been killed in the cockpit, he would have died of old age. So if you want to kind of continue on with that group, you can kind of write your own like story around that, do your own campaigns. That's again, if you get creative with it, you can do what you want. Why do you need like a source book to tell you that, oh, this power existed from point A to point B, and you can't play above and beyond that? You can do what you want. I mean, it's slightly more, I suppose, against the grain of the law if you're kind of going into like mercenary units, because if the group has been killed, the chances of them coming back are remote, to say the least. But with like, again, with most powers, if you do a little bit of research on it, you'll find that there is some weird story that you can replay, or a group that, if you really are into the Rasselhag Republic as their independent selves, then I'm sure that there are like stories written on that. Like this group basically held out on this world until like the 3080s or something, and there was just constant rebellion there against the like the Ghost Bear powers or Clan Wolf or whatever else. And, you can find that, and then you can run with that and do what. And that's why, that's the reason why they made the galaxy so massive in BattleTech, why there are thousands of systems and, God, I mean, there must be tens of thousands of planets. It's so that the players can just kind of dip in and out of wherever they want to play or whatever they're inspired by, and do what you want, really. And likewise, if you don't like a particular power, if you hate some power so much, just don't play them. Just ignore them. They don't have to kind of be in your like universe or your galaxy or whatever you want to call it when you are playing. So I think it's one of those like weird things, it's such, now I've said all that, it's such a weird thing to bring up, which is basically just do what you want. Why I'm saying it though is because I do see people getting really upset about it. Like, oh, Rasselhag, I haven't been able to play my faction for 100 years now in BattleTech or whatever it is. Like in that space of time, you can't play it. Yeah, yes, you can. The Rasselhag still exists. The battalion still exists. They're flying a different flag. But even, like I said, the camos are still the same for most of these groups. So they kind of amalgamate, which gives all kinds of interesting stories. I mean, think of how interesting a campaign would be if you had like a Rasselhag, like a hardened company with a free birth clan trinary. And they basically just get like squished together. Maybe they both get badly beaten up during a battle. So, the powers that be, in some office somewhere, basically just just amalgamate these two, let them become this new thing, and then think of like the stories that you can create on that, where you've got some clan mechs, but you've got some kind of like old tired inner sphere mechs. Maybe there's a couple of like clan, like true born there as well, so there's a lot of tension between them and the free births, and then tension between the clans and the inner sphere people. And the inner sphere have got like the old junker mechs, and the clans have got shiny new like second line and omni mechs. How do you even like make that work in terms of like the logistics of it? And I suppose this segues me nicely into my next series of episodes, which will be campaign operations, where you've got to think about things like that. Like, do you have like repair bays to do clan omni things to store them and repair them? Is it so expensive that like you can never garner the contracts to do, to get the money you need to kind of pay for that? So again, and thinking about all that stuff is what gives this universe so much flavour and depth. So just don't ever see it as, oh, they took my toys away. It's like, no, the sandbox is always there. The sandbox, things change. Sometimes someone has a castle there. Sometimes it's not a castle, whatever else. But within the confines of that sandbox, you can do what you want. You can build what you want. And I just think it's like unnecessary angst and like irritable behaviour. And I've heard several people, that I kind of respect, saying it as well. And I'm like, are we even in the same hobby here? Like, this whole thing is meant as just one ginormous, like, this is a universe and it's got all this great like depth and like story behind it. Now go and play the games and read the fiction, and you know, and even if like I always think it, when a fiction book comes out or like a source book and people get very upset about it, I'm like, look, the chances are that, you know, in 5 years time, in our real time, this will all just be like not the case anymore. Like this power that you hear will have gone. I mean, and I think as you get older, you kind of see that because you live it. I mean, it's like now looking at like the clans, and I've said this several times. I would love the clans to kind of leave, not leave BattleTech because that would be silly, but like I don't like that they are so like centrifugal to the BattleTech story because I think it kind of sidelines the inner sphere. The main reason that, though, honestly, and this is going to sound really weird, it's commercially. And I'm only saying this as someone who kind of frequents quite a few hobby shops. Whenever I go into hobby shops, I always like speak to one of the staff there. I'm like, oh, how's BattleTech selling? Oh yeah, really, really good. You know, we get stocked up. When I then go down the BattleTech aisle, it's really quite hard to find Inner Sphere Force packs because they sell really quickly. It's just full of clan stuff. And I think the clans, I think in a way, my dismissal of the clans, I kind of, you know, obviously it's a joke, they don't really exist. When I kind of call them sociopaths and lunatics or whatever else, it's just fun and games. But there is an element to it where I'm like, yeah, I think because they are quite two-dimensional and they're just not as interesting as the Inner Sphere powers, I'd just love to see like them sidelined or get what is owed them for that like 100 years of like sowing chaos and drama and all the horrible things they're involved with. But I still, it's one of those, like, if you look at it like, well, for me, I love to hate the clans, right? Like, that's how I feel about it. Like, the BattleTech universe would be completely empty and vacuous without them. They're so silly and so, like, over the top. And I just love to see them embarrassing themselves, even though they usually win because they're OP and, you know, they've got fancy toys. It still goes back to that point of, I don't want to see them got rid of. I want to play in the universe or in that sandbox where they exist. Don't expect me to be kind to them. And I think that, you know, the people that wrote BattleTech have got a little bit of a love in for them because it's their creation. Obviously, the Inner Sphere are their creation as well, but the clans, it's like they created that culture. Whereas the Inner Sphere come from like real world culture. So I think they looked at it as like, well, it's more interesting on the clan side. And yeah, I think that's true back in 1995 because it was all fresh and new. But now I'm like, yeah, it's a bit two-dimensional. But that's my kind of, you know, that's, again, I'm saying I teeter around falling into that trap, but I do it ironically, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, and I just think if you get into that mindset that I've just talked about in terms of playing where you want to play it, as you want to play, with what powers you want to play, just, again, just accept that, oh, the flag's changed now on the power. The chances are that power still exists, and even if it doesn't, there are completely legit workarounds that you'll have really fun being able to kind of explore if you are like playing campaigns of BattleTech. Anyway, I'll leave it here. So yeah, next week, fingers crossed, I can hopefully do some campaign ops. I am back at work next week, so. And then I'm recording quite a bit with DFA. So just fingers crossed I can find some time to do campaign ops over the next like 3 weeks. So I'd like it to be like 2 or 3 videos over the next month if possible. Anyway, on that note, I will catch you all again, hopefully. And I will... That's not my usual sign off, is it? What do I usually say? I'll hopefully see you again next time. There you go. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.